It's just over a week until India voters go to the polls in the country's general election, but it will be far from a quick process. The world's most populous democracy votes in 7 phases over 44 days. Ruchir Sharma, Rockefeller International Chairman, spoke with Wall Street Week host David Westin yesterday about India's economic rise and what to expect from the upcoming election.
If you look at India's economic progress since it got independence in 1947, right up until the 1980s, India was a big laggard economy. That its rankings in both per capita income terms, in terms of its GDP size, kept on falling for the entire period. The turning point as far as India's economic progress was concerned, I think, was really the 1990s, when you had the major burst of economic reforms that took place when the Indian economy nearly went bankrupt. It had to go to the IMF again and get a big rescue program. That's really what began India's economic turnaround, and that's what led to India's rise. And what we've seen over the past few years is a continuing momentum of that rise, which began in the early 1990s.
So that began before Prime Minister Modi came to office. At the same time, it has continued. How much is he getting credit today in India for that as he looks toward these elections?
Well, he's getting lots of credit for that, and I think there are 2 or 3 reasons for it. One is the fact that it's reached a sort of critical mass, which is that when India was rising in the 1990s or in the 2000s, the base was much smaller. It's still, in per capita income terms, a relatively small base, but now that India has become the world's 5th largest economy, that just tends to have a much greater effect. But in terms of his direct credit, I think that the one thing which is possibly underestimated is that how non-inflationary this growth has been over the last few years. That if you look at the previous growth spurts that India had, particularly in the preceding Congress government, one of the big problems was that it also led to a big surge in inflation. This time, inflation has been relatively low. And that is a big plus, because in politics around the world, economic growth may or may not matter, but inflation matters. Nothing kills the prospects of incumbents as much as rising prices. And the fact that inflation has been relatively under control is, I think, one of those underappreciated factors, because we as economic commentators or even political commentators focus so much on just the headline GDP growth numbers. So the fact that you have very low inflation or relatively low inflation, I think, has been a big positive. The other couple of things which are working in his favor is that this growth spurt has happened at a time when so many other emerging markets, including China, have been sputtering.
Which I think, Ruchir, takes us to an ultimate question, at least for Wall Street Week, which is it a good investment? In the past, you said India tends to disappoint both the optimists and the pessimists sooner or later. It sounds to me from what you said that Modi is a pretty good investment, but it's not as clear that India is once we move past Modi.
Yeah, at least for now, in terms of the economic momentum, is quite strong. So I would, but as I said, that India has been a very good investment ever since I began my career. So I think that India in general is a country that tends to move along. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, maybe 1.5 steps back at times. Under Modi, it's been less back, and you've got economic progress. But I'll only sort of say 2 things to summarize my view here. One, that yes, India does appear to have a lot of great momentum for now. But the second thing I will caution any emerging market investor is that don't put all your eggs in one basket. Because remember, 4 or 5 years ago, everyone only wanted to speak about China as the ultimate emerging market, and China sucked the energy out of so many other investment opportunities because it was seen as the only really big winning bet in emerging markets. Look how that turned out, or at least how the sentiment turned on that.
And that was Ruchir Sharma, Rockefeller International Chairman, and of course, Wall Street Week host David Westin.